The rain hadn't stopped since morning. A dull, endless drizzle soaked the fresh mound of dirt, turning the cemetery into a somber, muddy landscape. Daniel Whitmore stood motionless, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His wife, Margaret, was gone, laid to rest in the Whitmore family plot, beside generations of ancestors. But despite the funeral, despite the finality of it all, a gnawing unease sat heavy in his chest. He should have felt grief, or at least guilt. Instead, all he felt was suspicion. Margaret had been a careful woman, always in control, always one step ahead. Even in her final weeks, when illness had stripped her of everything, there had been something in her eyes, a knowing, a secret she had refused to share. And now, she was gone, and whatever she had been holding onto had died with her. Or so he thought. From the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Evelyn, standing a few steps away, shrouded in black. She kept her face carefully composed, her hands folded neatly in front of her, as if she were just another distant relative paying her respects. No one knew about them, not yet. But today wasn't about their affair. It was about Margaret's secret. Daniel's thoughts were interrupted by a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Henry Langston, Margaret's longtime lawyer, his face tight with something unreadable. "There's something we need to discuss," Henry murmured. Daniel nodded stiffly. "The will?" Henry hesitated. "Yes. And, something else. Can you come to my office this evening?" Something else. The word sent a chill through him. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice soft and practiced. "I'll drive you home, Daniel." But Daniel barely heard her. His mind was already spinning. Margaret had been secretive in the months before her death, making private phone calls, locking her study door, speaking in riddles. He had assumed it was paranoia, the side effects of illness. But what if it wasn't? What if she had been planning something? A mysterious will. The law office smelled of polished wood and old paper. Daniel sat stiffly across from Henry, his fingers tapping against the armrest of the leather chair. Evelyn sat beside him, her presence steadying, though he could tell she was just as curious as he was. Henry cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Margaret left detailed instructions for how she wanted her estate divided. Daniel nodded impatiently. "Yes, yes. The house, the savings, I know. Just tell me what's so unusual about it." Henry hesitated again. Then, he pulled out a thick envelope with Margaret's initials. "She left you this." Daniel took it, his pulse quickening. The envelope was heavy, as if something more than paper was inside. He turned it over, finding a single line written in Margaret's elegant script. "The truth is never buried forever." He glanced up at Henry. "What the hell does that mean?" Henry's face remained unreadable. "Perhaps you should open it." With trembling fingers, Daniel tore the seal and pulled out a stack of papers. But before he could read them, something heavy slid onto the desk with a soft clink. A key. Small, silver, old-fashioned. A sick feeling curled in his stomach. "What does this open?" Henry folded his hands. "Margaret instructed me to tell you only this: there is something hidden in the house. Something she wanted you to find, but only after she was gone." Daniel swallowed hard. He had lived in that house for over 20 years. What could possibly be hidden there that he didn't already know about? Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with intrigue. "Where do we start?" "The House of Secrets." By the time they returned to the Whitmore estate, the rain had stopped, leaving everything damp and glistening. The house loomed before them, its grand Victorian structure standing as a testament to a family legacy Daniel had never cared for. He hesitated at the door, fingers tightening around the key. The house was silent, eerily so. "We should start in her study," Evelyn suggested. "That's where she spent most of her time before she trailed off," but Daniel knew what she meant. Without another word, they stepped inside. Margaret's study had always been off-limits. It was her sanctuary, a place where she kept her thoughts locked away in neat leather-bound journals. Now, it felt like a tomb. Dust clung to the heavy curtains, the bookshelves stood like silent witnesses, and the faint scent of her perfume still lingered in the air. Daniel turned the key over in his palm. It was small, too small for a drawer or cabinet. Then his eyes landed on the grandfather clock in the corner. It was an antique, an heirloom from Margaret's father. He had never paid much attention to it, but now, something about it felt off. Evelyn noticed his hesitation. "Daniel?" He stepped forward and reached for the clock's wooden panel. To his shock, it shifted under his touch. A hidden compartment. His heart pounded as he inserted the key into the tiny lock. With a quiet click, the panel swung open, revealing a bundle of documents, old and yellowed with age. At the top was a marriage certificate. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His name wasn't on it. Margaret had been married before. And she had never told him. Evelyn's gasp barely registered as he pulled out the next document. A birth certificate. His hands trembled as he read the name. A child. Margaret had a child. And she had kept it a secret all these years. The room seemed to spin as realization crashed over him. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about a life he never knew existed. And whoever that child was, they were about to inherit everything. The silence in Margaret's study was deafening. Daniel's hands trembled as he held the fragile birth certificate. His eyes scanned the name over and over again, trying to make sense of it. Emma Louise Whitmore. Born, July 17, 1995. Mother, Margaret Whitmore. Father, unknown. The weight of it pressed down on his chest. His wife, the woman he had been married to for over 2 decades, had a child he never knew existed. And now, she was gone, leaving him with nothing but a name and a set of yellowed papers. Evelyn broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. She had a daughter? Daniel's jaw clenched. Looks like it. But, why would she hide this? Evelyn took the paper from his hands, examining it as if she could pull the truth from the ink. Did she give the child up for adoption? Did she? I don't know, Daniel interrupted. His mind was spinning. His wife had spent her final days locking herself away in this very room, keeping secrets, making private calls. And now he knew why. This wasn't just about an inheritance. This was about an entire life that had been kept from him. His fingers brushed against the old marriage certificate beneath the birth record. The date, 1994. 1 year before the child was born. Daniel swallowed hard. His wife had been married before him. And she never told him. His pulse quickened as he flipped through the documents. There were old letters, some faded with age, others more recent. Most were signed with a single initial, E. Emma. Daniel's breath hitched. Had Margaret been in contact with her daughter all these years? Had she hidden her in plain sight? Evelyn shifted beside him, a calculating look in her eyes. If Margaret had a child before she married you, and if that child is still alive. Daniel didn't need her to finish the sentence. The will. The inheritance. Everything Margaret owned, everything he thought belonged to him, could now legally belong to Emma. A stranger. His dead wife's secret daughter. The hunt for Emma. The night stretched on as Daniel and Evelyn scoured Margaret's study, searching for any clue about Emma's whereabouts. Most of the letters were short, frustratingly so. Messages like, "I miss you," and "I hope you're safe," littered the pages, but there were no addresses, no phone numbers. It was as if Margaret had gone to great lengths to ensure her daughter remained hidden. Evelyn exhaled sharply. She really didn't want anyone finding this girl. Daniel clenched his fists. But why? Just then, his eyes landed on an old leather-bound journal tucked between the books on the shelf. Margaret's handwriting was unmistakable. He flipped it open, skimming the first few pages. And then he found it. A single line, scribbled hastily across the page. "If anything happens to me, Emma is in danger." A chill ran down his spine. Danger? From whom? He turned the page, his heartbeat hammering. The next entry was dated just 3 months ago, in shaky handwriting. "I don't have much time. He's watching. I have to make sure Emma is protected." Daniel's stomach twisted. His mind reeled. Was Margaret afraid of someone? Had she been running from something? Or worse, had she been killed because of it? Evelyn's voice broke through his thoughts. "Daniel, look at this." She had found another letter, wedged inside the journal. This one was more recent. Daniel took it, his hands shaking. The letter was addressed to a P.O. box. And at the bottom, a single, desperate plea. "Emma, please don't trust him." Him. Again. Daniel's blood ran cold. Whoever this man was, Margaret had been terrified of him. And if Emma was still out there, she could be in danger right now. A dangerous lead. By morning, Daniel and Evelyn had traced the P.O. box to an address across town. It was registered under a woman named Helen Carter, a name Daniel had never heard before. "We need to find her," Evelyn said as she sipped her coffee, her fingers drumming against the table. "She might know where Emma is." Daniel hesitated. His wife had spent her final days trying to protect this girl. What if searching for her put Emma in even more danger? But there was another thought nagging at him. What if he was the danger Margaret had warned her daughter about? He clenched his jaw. No. That was ridiculous. He had loved Margaret. Sure, their marriage hadn't been perfect, but he had never. Evelyn's voice snapped him back to reality. "Are we doing this or not?" Daniel exhaled sharply. "Let's go." The woman who knew too much. Helen Carter's address led them to a small, run-down house on the outskirts of town. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where people kept to themselves. Daniel knocked. Silence. Then, shuffling from inside. The door cracked open, revealing an older woman with wary eyes. "Who are you?" Daniel straightened. "My name is Daniel Whitmore. I was Margaret's husband." The woman's expression darkened. "I was wondering when you'd come." Daniel exchanged a glance with Evelyn. "You knew about me?" Helen nodded but didn't open the door any further. "Margaret warned me about you." Daniel stiffened. "Excuse me?" Helen's eyes narrowed. "She told me you'd come looking. But she also told me to tell you nothing." Daniel's patience snapped. "I just buried my wife, and now I find out she had a daughter she kept secret from me. I think I deserve some answers." Helen studied him for a long moment before sighing. "It's not that simple, Mr. Whitmore." She glanced behind her, as if checking for something, or someone. "Emma's gone. She disappeared 2 weeks ago." Daniel's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, disappeared?" Evelyn pressed. Helen hesitated, then stepped outside, lowering her voice. "She was being followed. She told me she was afraid." Daniel's heart pounded. "By who?" Helen's face hardened. She wouldn't say. But she kept talking about a man. Daniel's breath hitched. "Him." Helen's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know what happened to her. But if you really want to find Emma, you need to ask yourself one thing." Daniel swallowed. "What?" Helen's eyes were sharp, calculating. Who had the most to gain from Margaret's death? A chill ran through him. Helen stepped back inside, her words lingering in the air. The closer you get to Emma, the closer you get to the truth. Then, without another word, she shut the door. Daniel stood frozen outside Helen Carter's house, the old woman's words echoing in his mind. The closer you get to Emma, the closer you get to the truth. And then, who had the most to gain from Margaret's death? A sharp gust of wind rustled the trees, but Daniel barely noticed. His mind was spinning. He had come here expecting to find answers about Emma. Instead, he had found a warning, one that sent an uneasy chill down his spine. Evelyn placed a hand on his arm. She knows more than she's telling us. Daniel clenched his jaw. Yeah. But the bigger question is, what does she think I did? Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Helen Carter had looked at him with suspicion. Margaret had warned her about him. Why? Evelyn was quiet for a moment before exhaling. So, what now? Daniel didn't hesitate. We find Emma. Whatever my wife was hiding, whatever she was afraid of, it starts with her daughter. A disturbing discovery. The drive back to town was tense. Evelyn kept stealing glances at Daniel, as if expecting him to explode. Finally, she broke the silence. You don't think Margaret was murdered, do you? Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. She was sick, Evelyn. Yes, but what if? There was no foul play, Daniel snapped. But even as the words left his mouth, he wasn't sure he believed them. Margaret had been paranoid in her final days. Afraid. She had whispered cryptic things in the middle of the night, warning him about people he had never met. And then there was the journal entry. If anything happens to me, Emma is in danger. He exhaled, forcing himself to focus. He had spent years thinking he knew his wife. Now, every memory of her felt like a carefully constructed illusion. Had she been running from something all along? Or worse, had she been running from someone? Unraveling the past. Back at the house, Daniel wasted no time. He returned to Margaret's study, flipping through her journal again, scanning for any detail he might have missed. Evelyn leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You think there's more? Daniel didn't answer. His fingers skimmed over the old, yellowed pages, searching for anything, any clue about Emma's disappearance or the mysterious man Margaret had feared. Then, he found it. Tucked between two pages was a torn newspaper clipping. The date was smudged, but the headline sent a jolt through his chest. Tragedy strikes at Whitmore Industries, mysterious death of business partner. Daniel's pulse pounded as he skimmed the article. Elliot Harrington, a former business associate of the Whitmore family, had been found dead under suspicious circumstances nearly 30 years ago. Margaret's father, Thomas Whitmore, had been investigated, but nothing was ever proven. Daniel stared at the name. Elliot Harrington. The E in the letters? A horrifying thought formed in his mind. Evelyn, he said, his voice strained. I think I know who Emma's father was. The ghost of Elliot Harrington. Elliot Harrington and Thomas Whitmore had been close once, business partners, co-founders of Whitmore Industries. But something had gone terribly wrong. The article hinted at fraud, betrayal, and a mysterious falling out in the months before Elliot's death. And now, decades later, Margaret had hidden a daughter with his last name. Evelyn's face paled. You think Margaret's father had something to do with Elliot's death? Daniel's stomach twisted. Maybe. But why would she hide Emma because of it? Daniel's hands curled into fists. Because if Emma is Elliot's daughter, that means she has a claim to everything. Not just Margaret's estate. The entire Whitmore empire. Suddenly, everything made sense. Margaret hadn't just hidden Emma from him. She had hidden her from the entire Whitmore family. Someone's watching. Before Daniel could respond, something outside caught his attention. A shadow moved past the window. He stiffened. Did you see that? Evelyn turned. See what? Daniel crossed the room in 3 quick strides, peering out the window. The front yard was empty, except for the faint impression of footsteps in the wet grass. Someone had been here. Watching. A chill ran down his spine. Evelyn's voice was tight. We're not alone, are we? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his coat. We need to find Emma before they do. A shocking lead. It took hours of digging, but they finally found something. One of the old letters in Margaret's study contained a bank deposit slip, issued just 2 weeks before she died. The recipient? Emma Louise Harrington. The address listed was a small apartment complex across town. Daniel's hands shook as he traced the letters of her name. Margaret had been sending Emma money, possibly hiding her, right up until the very end. Evelyn grabbed the car keys. Let's go. The apartment. The building was run down, the kind of place where no one asked questions. They climbed the stairs 2 at a time, stopping at the unit listed on the deposit slip. Daniel knocked. Silence. He knocked again, harder this time. Emma? It's... Click. The door creaked open an inch. Daniel's pulse thundered. He pushed it open the rest of the way. The apartment was dark. The curtains were drawn. Papers and clothes were scattered across the floor. Something was wrong. Evelyn whispered, she left in a hurry. Daniel scanned the room, his gut twisting. There was a coffee mug on the counter, still half full. A coat draped over the chair. She had been here. Recently. Then he saw it. Pinned to the fridge. A single note, scrawled in hurried, frantic handwriting. I know who killed her. I'm next. Daniel's breath caught. Evelyn covered her mouth. Daniel, she's in danger. But Daniel barely heard her. His eyes were locked on something else. A single name written beneath the note. Meet me at Whitmore Industries. Midnight. Alone. And below that, a signature. Emma. Daniel's stomach dropped. Margaret's daughter was walking straight into a trap. And she might not make it out alive. The city felt eerily quiet as Daniel pulled into the parking lot of Whitmore Industries. It was almost midnight. The towering glass building loomed over him, its dark windows reflecting the streetlights. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, gripping her phone tightly. This is a trap. Daniel clenched his jaw. I know. Everything about this felt wrong. Emma's desperate note had said, I know who killed her. I'm next. And then she had written this location. Why would she choose Whitmore Industries, the company built by Margaret's father, the very place connected to Elliot Harrington's suspicious death? Daniel didn't have an answer. But one thing was certain, Emma was in danger. He opened the glove compartment and pulled out a flashlight. He had no idea what he was walking into. Evelyn placed a hand on his arm. You don't have to go alone. Daniel shook his head. I do. Emma had written alone. Whoever had lured her here might bolt if he brought backup. Evelyn exhaled sharply but didn't argue. If you're not out in 30 minutes, I'm coming in. Daniel nodded, then stepped out of the car. Inside the lion's den. The main entrance was locked. Of course. Daniel moved around the side of the building, searching for another way in. Then he saw it, a side door, slightly ajar. His stomach twisted. Someone had already broken in. He stepped inside, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The place smelled of dust and old paper. Offices lined both sides of the corridor, their glass walls reflecting his shadow as he moved. Then. A sound. A soft shuffle. Daniel tensed, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. Emma, he whispered. Silence. He moved deeper into the building, past the old executive offices. The last time he had been here was years ago, during a company gala. The place had been alive then, filled with laughter and expensive champagne. Now, it felt like a mausoleum. Then he saw it. A sliver of light, coming from an open door at the end of the hall. Daniel's heart pounded as he approached. He peered inside. And froze. Emma's last stand. Emma stood in the middle of the room, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She looked so much like Margaret that Daniel's breath caught. But she wasn't alone. A man stood behind her, gripping her arm. Daniel's blood ran cold. Richard Whitmore. Margaret's brother. The truth comes out. Daniel. Richard's voice was smooth, almost amused. I was wondering when you'd show up. Daniel's fists clenched. Let her go. Richard tightened his grip on Emma. Now. Let's not be dramatic. Emma's eyes met Daniel's, silently pleading for help. Daniel's mind raced. Why was Richard here? He had always been the quiet one in the Whitmore family, preferring to stay in the shadows while Margaret handled the company. But now, here he was, holding Margaret's daughter hostage. Richard smirked. You must be wondering why I'm here. Daniel didn't respond. He was too busy looking for a way to get Emma out of this alive. Richard continued, his voice cold. Margaret wasn't as clever as she thought. She spent years hiding Emma, thinking no one would find out. But I always knew. Daniel's stomach twisted. You knew? Richard nodded. Of course. I knew from the moment Margaret started siphoning money from the company, sending it to a daughter no one was supposed to know existed. Emma jerked in his grip, her voice shaking. You killed her. Richard's smirk faded. Daniel's breath caught. Had Richard poisoned Margaret? Had he made her illness worse? Richard's expression hardened. Your mother made a mistake. She thought she could keep secrets from me. But I always find out the truth. Daniel's blood boiled. And what truth is that? Richard's eyes darkened. That she was planning to cut me out of the company. That she wanted to leave everything to Emma. Daniel's heart pounded. So that was it. Margaret had changed her will. She had been planning to give everything to the daughter she had spent years hiding. And Richard had killed her for it. A desperate gamble. Daniel took a step forward. Richard, listen to me. You don't have to do this. Richard laughed. Oh, but I do. He pulled something from his coat. A gun. Emma gasped. Daniel's breath caught. Richard pointed the weapon at Emma's head. You see, this is the only loose end left. Once she's gone, there's no one left to contest the inheritance. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. He had seconds to act. Think. The flashlight in his hand was heavy. If he could just. Richard's finger tightened on the trigger. Now. Daniel lunged. The fight for survival. He swung the flashlight with all his strength, aiming for Richard's wrist. Crack. The gun went off. A deafening blast. But the shot went wild, hitting the ceiling. Emma screamed. Richard stumbled back, cursing. The gun slipped from his hand, skidding across the floor. Daniel didn't hesitate. He tackled Richard, slamming him into the desk. Papers flew. A lamp crashed to the ground. Richard snarled, throwing a punch. Daniel barely dodged. He grabbed Richard's collar, slamming him against the wall. You killed her, Daniel growled. Richard grinned, blood dripping from his lip. She had it coming. Rage surged through Daniel. He pulled back his fist. A sudden movement. Richard lunged for the gun. Bang. Another gunshot. For a moment, everything was still. Then Richard crumpled to the floor, clutching his leg. Blood seeped between his fingers. Emma stood over him, her hands shaking. The gun trembled in her grip. She had shot him. Her breath hitched. I didn't mean to. Daniel grabbed the gun gently. It's over. Sirens wailed in the distance. Evelyn. She must have called the police. Richard groaned, his face contorted in pain. His reign of terror was over. The aftermath. By the time the police arrived, Emma was shaking. Daniel held her close, whispering, "You're safe now." She sobbed into his chest. Richard was arrested, charged with attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. The truth about Margaret's death came out. Richard had tampered with her medication, accelerating her illness. All for money. All for power. In the end, he lost everything. Emma inherited her mother's fortune. But more than that, she inherited the truth. She was no longer a secret. She was no longer alone. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt the same. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint rustle of papers and the occasional clicking of a pen. The trial of Richard Whitmore had gripped the media for weeks. Journalists crowded the benches, cameras flashing outside the courthouse, waiting for any sign of the jury's verdict. Daniel sat beside Emma, his jaw tight as he watched Richard. The man who had killed Margaret, tried to silence Emma, and nearly destroyed everything, now sat in a tailored suit, pretending to be the victim. But the evidence was overwhelming. The tampered medication. The altered financial records. The gunshot wound in his leg, delivered by the very niece he had tried to erase. Richard had underestimated Emma. Now, he was about to face the consequences. The verdict. The jury foreman stood. The room held its breath. The judge's voice was steady. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." Emma gripped Daniel's hand. He could feel her trembling. The foreman cleared his throat. "On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant." A pause. Then, "Guilty." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Richard's face twisted in rage. "This is a mistake," he shouted, rising from his seat. "I built this company. The bailiffs grabbed him before he could lunge forward. The judge's gavel slammed down. "Order in the court." Daniel exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. It was over. Emma, beside him, was crying, but not out of sadness. Relief. Justice had been served. Or so they thought. An unfinished battle. Later that evening, as they left the courthouse, a swarm of reporters surrounded them. "Emma, how does it feel to win the case? Will you be taking over Whitmore Industries? Do you believe your life is still in danger?" Emma hesitated. Daniel placed a protective hand on her back, guiding her through the chaos. "Let's go," he murmured. Inside the car, she finally exhaled. "I should feel better." "You don't?" She looked out the window. "I don't know. It's just, my mother's gone. And now Richard's going to prison. But none of this brings her back." Daniel understood. The truth had cost them so much. And there was still one loose end. Whitmore Industries. Emma had inherited everything Margaret left behind, including control of the multi-billion-dollar empire Richard had fought so hard to steal. But Emma wasn't ready. And someone else wanted to take it from her. The shadow in the boardroom. The next morning, Emma received a summons. The Whitmore Board of Directors had called an emergency meeting. Daniel didn't like it. They never supported Margaret. "Why would they support you?" Emma sighed. "Because they don't have a choice. I legally own the company." "Emma." I have to do this, Daniel. So, they went. The boardroom was filled with sharks in expensive suits. Men and women who had once answered to Margaret, now watching Emma with wary eyes. At the head of the table sat a man Emma didn't recognize. Tall. Silver-haired. Impeccably dressed. His presence sent a chill down Daniel's spine. Emma straightened. Who are you? The man smiled. My name is Victor Lancaster. He folded his hands. And I'm here to discuss your future. Daniel's gut twisted. He had heard the name before. Victor Lancaster was a corporate raider. A man who devoured companies, stripped them for assets, and left nothing but ruin behind. Emma frowned. I own Whitmore Industries. My mother left it to me. Victor's smile didn't fade. Ah, but ownership and control are two different things. The board members nodded. Some even smirked. Emma's grip tightened on the table. What does that mean? Victor leaned forward. It means, my dear, that the board doesn't want you here. The coup. The meeting turned hostile. Board members took turns attacking Emma. You have no experience. You're too young to run a company of this size. Your mother was reckless with money, what makes you any different? Emma's face was pale, but she held her ground. My mother built this company, she said, her voice shaking. I won't let you destroy it. Victor chuckled. That's where you're wrong. He slid a folder across the table. We've already voted. Emma hesitated before opening it. Inside was a motion of no confidence. A legal document removing her from power. Daniel swore under his breath. They were stealing the company right out from under her. Emma's hands curled into fists. You can't do this. Victor adjusted his cufflinks. We already have. An impossible choice. Emma was trapped. The board had voted her out. Victor Lancaster was preparing to dismantle Whitmore Industries, sell it for parts, and erase the last thing Margaret had ever built. Unless. Victor smiled. You do have an alternative. Emma's heart pounded. What? Sell your shares. Walk away with $100 million. Live your life, free from all of this. Daniel could see the conflict in Emma's eyes. She wanted to fight. But she also wanted to be free. Victor leaned in. Think about it. A lifetime of wealth, no stress, no corporate battles. Emma swallowed. Then, softly, I need time. Victor smiled. Of course. But Daniel saw it in his eyes. Victor wasn't going to wait. And if Emma didn't sell? There would be consequences. A sinister warning. That night, Daniel drove Emma home in silence. He could tell she was shaken. Finally, she spoke. What if I just let it go, Daniel? What if I walk away? Daniel exhaled. Would that be what Margaret wanted? Emma was quiet. Before she could answer, Daniel's phone buzzed. A blocked number. He answered. Hello? A distorted voice spoke. Tell her to sell. Before it's too late. Daniel's blood ran cold. Emma looked at him. Who is it? The voice chuckled. Tick-tock, Daniel. The line went dead. Daniel stared at the phone. Emma's eyes were wide. What was that? Daniel clenched his jaw. It means they're not going to let you walk away, Emma. She swallowed hard. Because suddenly, Richard wasn't the only enemy they had to worry about. Someone else wanted Whitmore Industries. And they were willing to kill for it. Emma paced the length of her living room, her arms wrapped around herself. The call from the blocked number still echoed in her mind. Tell her to sell. Before it's too late. Daniel stood by the window, watching the street below. He had already checked the locks, twice. "They're watching us," he muttered. Emma stopped pacing. "Who?" "Richard's in jail." Daniel shook his head. "Richard was just part of it. This goes deeper." Emma swallowed. She had fought so hard for the truth, for her mother's legacy, but what if she was in over her head? Then, a knock at the door. Both of them froze. Daniel moved first, hand hovering over the gun he had hidden in his waistband. Another knock. Emma whispered, "Who is it?" A pause. Then, "It's Evelyn. A dead woman's secret." Daniel exhaled in relief and opened the door. Evelyn stepped inside, looking over her shoulder before shutting the door behind her. She looked rattled. "I found something," she said. "Something you need to see." She pulled out a flash drive and handed it to Emma. "What is it?" Emma asked. Evelyn's voice was grim. "Your mother's last message. The final confession." Minutes later, the three of them sat in front of Emma's laptop. The video file flickered to life. Margaret Whitmore's face filled the screen. She looked tired, older than Emma remembered. Her once perfect posture was slumped, her usual confidence replaced with fear. Emma's breath caught. Her mother knew she was going to die. Margaret took a shaky breath. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And that means you're in danger." Emma's hands tightened into fists. Margaret continued, her voice urgent. "Richard is not the only threat. There is someone more powerful, someone who has been waiting for me to fall. And now, they will come for you." Emma shivered. Margaret leaned forward. "His name is Victor Lancaster." Daniel's jaw clenched. Victor. The man who had already stolen Whitmore Industries from Emma. Margaret's voice dropped to a whisper. "He made me an offer, years ago. Sell the company, or pay the price." She swallowed. "I refused. And now, Emma, you will have to make the same choice." Silence filled the room. Emma felt like she couldn't breathe. Evelyn whispered, "Your mother fought for this company, but it cost her everything." Emma's hands trembled as she reached for the keyboard, pausing the video. She turned to Daniel. "I'm not selling." Daniel studied her. "Emma." "No," she said firmly. "My mother didn't back down. Neither will I." Evelyn sighed. "Then you need to prepare for war." The blood-stained ledger. The next morning, Daniel and Evelyn met at a hidden location, an old office Margaret had once used for private business. Evelyn had been digging into Victor Lancaster's records. What she found was terrifying. "He's done this before," she said, laying out files. 5 companies in the last 15 years. He forces the heirs to sell, then buries any loose ends. Daniel frowned. "What kind of loose ends?" Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "People. Witnesses. Lawyers. Anyone who stands in his way." Daniel's stomach twisted. Victor didn't just buy companies. He eliminated people. And now, Emma was his next target. A deadly invitation. That night, Emma received an invitation. A sleek black envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single card. "Dinner. 9 p.m. Lancaster Tower. Let's discuss your future. No threats. No demands. Just a simple invitation." But Emma knew what it really meant. Daniel shook his head. "It's a trap." Emma nodded. "I know." Daniel crossed his arms. "So, what's the plan?" Emma took a deep breath. "We go. The Devil's Table." Lancaster Tower was a fortress. Glass walls, security guards, cameras in every corner. The entire building screamed power. Victor Lancaster sat at the head of a long dining table, a glass of red wine in his hand. He smiled when Emma entered. "Ah," he said. "The heir to the Whitmore empire." Emma didn't sit. "You wanted to talk. So talk." Victor swirled his wine. "Your mother was a remarkable woman. Stubborn, of course. But remarkable." Emma's voice was cold. "You killed her." Victor chuckled. "No. Richard did that. I simply let nature take its course." Daniel clenched his fists. "Why bring us here?" Victor set down his glass. "To give you one last chance." He leaned forward. "Sell. Walk away. Live." Emma didn't blink. "And if I don't?" Victor sighed. Then he snapped his fingers. The doors burst open. 2 men in suits stepped inside. Armed. Daniel's hand went to his waistband, but before he could move, a gun pressed against the back of his head. A deep voice murmured, "Don't." Daniel froze. Victor smiled. "You see, Emma, this isn't just business. It's survival." Emma's heart pounded. She had made a mistake. She had walked right into the lion's den. The final offer. Victor stood, walking toward Emma. "Last chance," he murmured. "Sign the contract. Walk away with a fortune. Or," he gestured toward Daniel, "lose everything." Emma's hands clenched. She could feel Daniel watching her, waiting for her next move. Her mother had died for this company. Now, it was Emma's turn to choose. Her life. Or her legacy. Her pulse thundered. Then. A crash. One of the windows shattered. A figure in black burst through, Evelyn. Gun drawn. Chaos erupted. Daniel elbowed the man behind him, spinning to grab the gun. A shot fired, hitting the wall. Victor snarled. "Kill them." Emma lunged for the contract, grabbed it, then threw it into the fire. Victor's eyes widened. "You stupid girl." Daniel tackled him. They crashed through the table. Evelyn fired, one guard down. Emma ran. Victor was pinned beneath Daniel, struggling, gasping. Then. A second gunshot. Victor went still. Daniel rolled off him, breathing hard. The bullet had hit Victor in the shoulder. He wouldn't be getting up any time soon. Evelyn grabbed Emma's arm. "We have to go. Now." Sirens blared outside. The police. It was over. Aftermath. Victor Lancaster was arrested for conspiracy, attempted murder, and corporate fraud. Emma kept Whitmore Industries, but at a cost. She had nearly died for it. She stood in her mother's office the next day, looking out at the city. Daniel stepped beside her. Was it worth it? Emma exhaled. Yes. Because her mother hadn't fought in vain. And now, neither would she. The morning air was crisp as Emma Whitmore stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her mother's office, overlooking the city her family had built. She should have felt victorious. Victor Lancaster was behind bars. His empire was falling apart. Whitmore Industries was safe. And yet. Emma felt uneasy. Something wasn't right. Then. Her office phone rang. She picked it up. Emma Whitmore. A pause. Then a voice she never expected to hear again. "You think it's over, don't you?" Emma's blood turned to ice. It was Richard. The man who wouldn't stay buried. Richard, the man who had killed her mother. The man who had nearly destroyed her family. The man who was supposed to be rotting in prison. Emma's grip tightened on the phone. "How are you calling me?" Richard chuckled. "Money buys many things, Emma. Even freedom." Emma's stomach twisted. "Lies," she spat. "You were sentenced to 25 years. Another chuckle. "And yet, here I am." Emma turned to Daniel, who had been listening on speakerphone. His expression was dark. "We have unfinished business," Richard continued. "Meet me. One last time." Emma should have hung up. She should have walked away. But she couldn't. "Where?" she asked. A ghost from the past. The meeting place was unexpected, an old abandoned estate on the outskirts of town. It was the same estate where Richard had once proposed to Margaret Whitmore. The irony wasn't lost on Emma. Daniel insisted on coming with her. So did Evelyn. As they stepped inside, the smell of dust and decay filled the air. Then, a slow clap echoed through the room. Richard emerged from the shadows, dressed in a tailored suit, looking completely at ease. Emma's breath caught. Behind him stood a familiar face. Her heart stopped. It was Victor Lancaster. Alive. Smiling. The final betrayal. Emma's world tilted. "No," she whispered. Victor was supposed to be in jail. She had watched him bleed out on the floor. And yet, here he was, standing beside Richard. Richard smirked. Surprised? Emma's throat was dry. "You were enemies. You tried to destroy each other." Victor chuckled. "That's what we wanted you to think." Emma's pulse pounded. It was all a setup. Richard and Victor had never been at war. They had been working together. Evelyn whispered, this was all a game. Victor's voice was smooth. Not a game. A test. Emma clenched her fists. A test for what? Richard's smile widened. To see if you were worthy. A legacy of blood. Emma's mind raced. Her mother had fought to protect Whitmore Industries from these men. She had died for it. And now, they were standing before her, still in control. Daniel's hand inched toward his gun. If you think we're just going to hand it over, you. Victor held up a hand. Relax, he said. We don't want to take Whitmore Industries. Emma narrowed her eyes. Then what do you want? Victor leaned in, his voice a whisper. We want you. The choice. Emma's breath caught. Richard spoke next. Your mother was a fighter. But she made a fatal mistake. She fought against us. Victor nodded. You, however, have a chance to do something different. Richard's voice softened. Join us, Emma. Be one of us. Emma's stomach turned. They wanted her to work with them. To become part of the very corruption she had been fighting against. She refused. Emma stepped back. I'd rather die. Victor sighed. A pity. Then he nodded. And the gunfire began. The final battle. Daniel shoved Emma to the ground as the first bullet shattered a window. Evelyn pulled her own gun, firing back. The room exploded into chaos. Emma crawled behind a desk, heart racing. She spotted Richard through the gunfire, calm, collected, walking toward her with a silencer in hand. Emma, he called, his voice almost gentle. She grabbed the first thing she could find, a rusted metal rod. As Richard approached, she swung. The rod collided with his wrist. His gun clattered to the floor. Emma lunged for it. Richard was faster. He grabbed her by the throat, slamming her against the wall. Her vision blurred. Then. A gunshot. Richard's grip loosened. His eyes widened. He stumbled backward. Blood bloomed across his chest. He looked down, shocked. Then he collapsed. Evelyn lowered her gun, breathing hard. "Stay down," she whispered.